Hey, Craig. Well, it's probably time to talk about China again. Yeah, Chinese keeps coming back into the news. Now, they're still having the same problems they were having earlier this year. They're having horrible natural disasters, terrible flooding for months, and hitting them everywhere. I mean, on their east coast, up through their largest valleys, they've had locusts, they've had hail, the flooding, of course, but on top of that, of course, the mistreatment of the people that live in China. There's a real power struggle starting to take place inside of China, especially ever since they cracked down on Hong Kong and basically took their liberties away. It's going to be interesting to see how all this shakes out. Of course, we're all familiar with the virus, and that has turned basically the whole world against China. And China does not like that because the way they work, and as you know, China is communist. They like to put out this image that they're very in control, that they're very advanced, that they don't have internal problems, and that they are taking things over. They want to convince people that they are ultimately the biggest power on the planet. But that has been slipping quickly, and they're not happy about it. They've been found to be the liars that they are. They've misrepresented the value of their currency. They've misrepresented the value of the companies they've put on our stock exchange. They've misrepresented their agreements with intellectual property, business agreements. I mean, there's almost no category that you can look to China and say, well, they really stand for the truth. They just don't. They don't care about the rest of us at all. And I think the virus really was a very stark reminder to everybody of what a communist country is willing to do to take advantage of people. Growing up, Russia was always the big communist danger. We had the Cold War going, and we were all taught to fear Russia. And, Russia is still a bit of a problem. It's no longer the USSR. It's just Russia. Ever since they had to tear down their wall, they've really had to step back and try to reconfigure their economy and their structure because they're having a tough time. The only product they have to sell to the world right now is oil, and oil's not selling for very much money these days. So Russia's not really our problem anymore. Their military's in bad shape. Kind of like China, a lot of what they have, they steal from us as far as technology goes. And, Venezuela's a huge mess and Cuba's a huge mess. And what we're really left with, and for so long we ignored, was the growth of China. Now we know that there's a ton of people that live there, and it's a big country. But it's always been the appeal of China to business people throughout the world has been that they have very inexpensive labor. And if you want to build things in China and sell it in China, you can take advantage of that inexpensive labor and not only sell things in China, but of course then sell those same things all across the world. And you'll save that money initially because you don't have to pay that much in labor. And a lot of our industry here in the United States basically packed up their bags and moved to China to take advantage of that. And a lot of them were based in Hong Kong. Offices would be in Hong Kong because they had a legal status that was very favorable. And then they'd do their manufacturing all throughout Asia, but a lot of it done right there in China, and basically where they can control it and save that money on labor. But the low labor costs don't help the people very much. And what we found over time is that maybe the cost wasn't as low. I mean, we know of things like slave labor, child labor, stuff like that. But we also know that they manipulate their currency. They basically lie about assets. When they enter our markets, they don't report the numbers like we do, and we've found in a lot of cases where they have a stock offering that the numbers behind it don't jive with reality at all. And then you'll see stuff like, when they supply parts, everything from screws and bolts to, completed whatever it is, some sort of manufactured good, that the quality becomes less and less and less over time. What we found is that they don't have any problem with shorting you on the level of quality and basically deviating away from what the agreement was in the first place. So when we found ourselves in the midst of this virus, everyone, of course, first took stock of, well, what do we have? What do we need to do? How are we going to deal with this? And one of the things we found was that, well, we need masks, we need gowns, we need all these things for the hospitals to prepare for this sudden rush of new patients who would have this virus. And as we looked around and tried to find the goods that we needed, they were nowhere to be found, very few. And we found out eventually that China had been going around and buying up all this stuff all over the world and bringing it back to China, where they would in turn resell it to the rest of the world and make even more money, because now there's much more demand. And they could do this, of course, because they had taken over most of the manufacturing. And so, when it comes down to like the raw drugs that we need to deal with this virus, we don't manufacture anything in this country anymore. Not really. It's all manufactured over there. And you see stuff, like, I don't know, silly little things, that you could easily make here. But you see, like this pack of straws or something is made in China. Why? Why is so much, even stuff that isn't made there is packaged there and then sent here? It seems very odd. But then you start to see that how much influence they have. We control all of these markets. They bought up a lot of the pork plants here in the States. They're controlling that. Poultry, there's, you name the product, basically. If it's a hot category, they've taken it over. I was in the textile industry, and they completely took that over. I mean, there's almost nothing left in this country, from where it was 20 years ago. And then you'll also notice how the quality level keeps dropping. And, maybe the price is low, but it's not durable. It doesn't last. So when you buy the $10 T-shirt, does it last a couple of years? I can find old T-shirts, from 20, 30 years ago that are still holding up. But it's hard to find one from 5 years ago that's worth a damn. They're all gauzy and flimsy and you name it. Bolts, stuff like that, bearings, basic components to all kinds of things that we use every day. They just don't last like they used to. And that's by design. Not only do they save the money on the labor, but then again, they're willing to short you on the quality level. They don't care. They just want to get the product out to you and get our money. And that's really what it boils down to, is they want our money. They want our resources. And, that sounds like capitalism, right? You're in competition, and who can provide the same thing for the lowest price. That's capitalism. That's how you win in capitalism. But they're cheating. When their price is low, it's because they've manipulated. When their labor cost is low, maybe it's only because they're showing you a low labor cost when the actual cost is different. But they're communist, so they can force their people to deal with certain things that our people here or anywhere else would never consider dealing with. Well, until maybe recently, because all of a sudden now we're accepting all kinds of strange limitations and sort of burdensome compliance, let's say, with all this virus. But I'll get into that in a second. But I want to make the point first that China is a big communist country, and they don't do things the way we do. They don't have the same moral compass that we have. As a matter of fact, morality doesn't even enter the picture. They don't condone religion. They just, it's about the state. You serve the state, and the hope is that the state grows. And that's the bigger point, is how do they grow it? How do they grow China? Well, it's not really so much to expand their borders, but it's to expand their influence. And they've been doing that in every way they can for decades. And, well, it's made a big difference in the whole world. Not only obviously in this virus, but let's look at what led up to it. They're studying viruses in such a way that other parts of the world wouldn't. They'd look at it as ethically not achievable. It's like the I can't remember what it's called, but basically pushing viruses to adapt towards being harmful to people. That kind of gain of function is what I'm trying to remember. That kind of study just we wouldn't allow it in this country. We have from time to time, and usually calmer minds prevail and they shut it down. But in China, there's no problem with something like that. If it pays well, sure, we'll do it. They just don't care. A point in how much they don't care. Right before the World Health Organization was supposed to go into Wuhan to take a look at where this virus may have come from, they went ahead and flooded out the city by releasing huge amounts of water from their Three Gorges Dam ahead of the rainy season, which, for better or for worse, they didn't have to let all the water out that fast when they did. But it ends up that they had to continue releasing tons and tons of water out of there because the rain has been relentless. Where it normally ends in sometime around August, it's still going. So they've got troubles there. But anyway, my point being that they flooded out all the towns downstream of that dam just to cause trouble for the World Health Organization, which by all accounts really is in China's pocket anyway. But of course they wouldn't let the U.S. or anyone else in there to study this area either. They're not interested in helping the rest of the world out, but they are interested in selling us products when we need it. And of course they worked on their own vaccine, and they'd love to sell the world that. But at this point, I don't think the world wants a whole lot of Chinese product. The whole world's trying to figure out how to get away from depending on China, who has shown willingness to just cut off the supply when it suits them, and they can leverage their power. But what is it about a communist country? Why do they want to spread their influence? Well, they want to make the rest of us communist. For communism to really rule the world, it has to be a communist world. We all have to agree by their rules. And most wealthy nations would never agree to those kinds of rules. But when you get into such a situation that you don't know how to save yourself anymore, you'll agree to almost any rule. And that's what they've been pushing. And the way they do it is very corrupt, not surprisingly. Take, for example, the Belt and Road Initiative, where they've been building infrastructure throughout Africa and South America and poor nations. And they basically approach them and say, hey, you're way behind the rest of the world in your internet or your roads or your ports or whatever they need, railroads, stuff like that. Say, well, we can, we're China, we manufacture all kinds of stuff, and we manufacture it inexpensively, and we can set you up. We can come in here, lend you the money, put this thing together, and we'll get you guys up and running. And while they're selling these programs, one of the things that China is very good at doing is going in and identifying people who are corruptible, people who, for one reason or another, have some sort of shortcoming, that makes it easy. Either they, sex, money, power, influence, any of these things. It's the usual, this is how you corrupt people kind of deal. And China's got no problem doing that, and they specialize in it. And they actually have spies and people that work for the government specifically to do that kind of thing. And so what they've done in these countries where they've approached them with this infrastructure is they've identified people who are corruptible. They corrupt them. They basically have the goods on them, and let them know, hey, you now depend on us for whatever. And we'll let that continue. But what we need is for you to help approve these programs, bring in more programs. What we need is for you to put your country further into debt to China. And they do this for a bunch of reasons. I mean, obviously China's got them over a barrel, but at the same time they're getting well paid. They're getting the kind of things they like. They've got the power and influence. It's the old promise of communism. The people in power will continue to stay in power and maybe even have more power as long as they make the rest of the powerful happy. If they don't, they're disappeared. Because when you live under those rules, you die by those rules. But so they've identified people throughout the world that they could corrupt. And they've utilized those corrupt people to gain more and more influence to the point where finally they get those countries into such a state that there's no way they can pay these debts back. And they basically seize assets. They say, well, you owe us this. And so, they're usually there because there's some sort of raw material that they want. Or a port location, something like that. But they use that as the reason to seize whatever it is they're after in the first place. And then there they are. There's China installed in whichever country, and they're all over the place. So that's not too hard to imagine. We've seen how third world countries are, and we've seen the level of corruption. But, there's really no reason to think that we in the United States are less corruptible than those in other places, right? Most people, I think, would not hesitate in agreeing that, yeah, there's a lot of corrupt people in our government. There's a lot of corrupt people in our power structure. And China has taken advantage of that. And, certainly Russia has in the past and continues to do so when they can. I mean, we have three enemies right now who are really... They're spending a lot of money and utilizing a lot of assets to try to mess us up right now. Russia, China, and Iran. And they all have a serious bone to pick with us because we've messed up their plans. But we had to because they're messing us up in the process of trying to play out their plans. As we're trying to create meaningful business relationships with other countries, they're coming in and undermining us. They're coming and saying, hey, we can do it for less. But they can't do it for less. They can tell you that, they can get you in the door, but in reality, by the time you really pay the price, and the price not only being money, but I mean, just in our basic ethics, they've got you where it's kind of too late. It says, well, we've got you in this situation. Now you depend on us. And you can't find this for less money elsewhere, so you're just going to have to buy these goods from us. And, oh, by the way, we stole your intellectual secrets, and we're manufacturing the same part that we're making for you. Some other side of China, it's identical, and we're selling it under some other name, and there's nothing you can do about it because we're communist and we can do whatever we want. So it's easy to see how we probably have the kind of folks here in this country that would allow the Chinese to corrupt them. And this has been going on for quite a while. And, I don't think it's a secret, especially now. I mean, you see Marxist organizations like Black Lives Matter and a bunch of these other ones gaining strength, especially right now as we come up towards an election. And you got to realize that a lot of the money behind these, and certainly there's a lot of domestic people that we're very familiar with that pour a lot of money in, but China's right there along with them, and China's always been there. They've fostered this, especially when you look at San Francisco or New York. those are areas that have had huge Chinese influence for many, many, many years. And it hasn't lessened, at this point, especially because the whole world is sort of turning against them. They're really using those resources to try to chip away at it and say, no, nothing to see here. And I think if you look back at the positions different politicians are taking right now, certainly the last two debates, especially the vice president debate, Kamala Harris was not willing to really say anything bad about China. She's San Francisco, she's California, where China influence is really large. And we're seeing that. We're seeing where the Chinese influence on local politicians out there is really we're reaping some benefits for China right now. And so, even at a time where we should be united and saying, hey, China has caused this trouble, that's not what we're seeing, is it? We're seeing Biden and Harris blaming our own president on this virus and saying, oh, he's mismanaged it. And it's like, well, first, that's ridiculous because our government has done more to deal with this virus this year than I've ever seen anyone ever do for anything. I mean, it's been amazing. To think that we could have a vaccine, in less than a year is amazing. That we were able to manufacture all the masks and gowns and the equipment that we needed. I mean, we've really stepped up to the plate as a country. And I think our leadership should be congratulated for doing a really good job at getting industry and everybody else, stepping up to the plate. It's very unfortunate that we had the shutdown, and I think most sane people agree at this point that was a mistake. We should not do that again. Because all that does is it just delays the inevitable. If you're susceptible to getting this virus, you're going to get it. It's a virus. They're just around. You'd be very, very lucky or very unlucky, I'm not sure, if you were able to hide so well that you could hide from this virus. It's just, it doesn't really work that way. So it's eventually you've got to get out. But for, the good news, of course, is for the majority of people, you're going to be fine. Even for the worst category, I think you're talking 95% of the people recover. But for most categories, people under 50, 99.9% chance of recovery. It's a nasty virus. If you get it, you don't want it. But there it is. I mean, it's a virus, and it's here with us. A vaccine may work for you, it may not. Not all vaccines work for everyone. That's just how it is. But we took steps that we've never taken before for this virus, and I think it's all because the whole thing has been hyped up so much to get people so worried about it. And certainly China keeping everyone in the dark for about a month and a half before they really released any information didn't help. And certainly the weird way that we've all reacted, like, suddenly all the toilet paper disappearing, which started in Asia. It makes me wonder sometimes. It's like, is this like a misinformation campaign? Did it start with like, well, let's see what happens if we start this like run on toilet paper? Oh yeah, that worked. Well, let's try something else. Let's start a run on masks. Well, we've never worn masks, right? And then, initially, like Fauci came out, you don't need a mask. And then all of a sudden, oh my God, we all have to have masks. And at first it was because hospitals didn't have masks. And so, hey, don't go out and buy them, let the hospitals have them. Well, that created a huge demand, because as soon as people say, hey, no, you shouldn't have it because they need it, and then you're like, oh man, I've got to find it and I got to get it all. And, like I said, China had brought back a lot of these supplies early on. And, you just wonder, is this the kind of thing that they've baked into this? They're pretty bad like that. And on top of this whole thing, as you're watching, when the virus started off, of course, we're all shut down and doing our part, and I think it seemed a little bit patriotic. But, then those riots started, right? And it's not a coincidence, because we know that there are organizations out there that have been working on this for years, been trying to set the groundwork so that they could find any instance and just blow it up. So, The George Floyd instance was perfect. I mean, sure, there's a lot more to it than what we saw, but what we all saw was horrific. And I think universally everyone said, "No, that's wrong. That cop shouldn't be kneeling on that guy's neck, and that guy obviously died, and that cop's bad." I don't know anybody that disagrees with that, but it didn't matter. It was blown into something that went from police brutality to racism, and racism's one of those things. I mean, you can't. There's not a good argument back, right? If somebody says, "Well, you're a racist," what can you say? You're like, "Well, no, I'm not." And so, "Well, yes, you are," and I've got all this weird criteria. All this was designed by the same folks, the same Marxist folks that have caused so many problems for us for so long, to cause these problems. It was intended to act as a wedge. It was intended to cause disruption. And when you consider that we've all been locked away for so long, and people are getting edgy, and people can't have the social interaction they're accustomed to. I mean, we're just in a perfect situation to be taken advantage of. And you can look at our own politics, but this is more than our own politics. This is more the Democrat, Republican. This is really the Marxists stepping up to the plate. And the Marxists don't care. They're not Democrat. They're not Republican. They're Marxists. I mean, they're not looking for us to resolve our issues. They're looking for us to basically boil it up to a point where we all just give up and say, we'll try something else. And we are at that point. Most forms of government only last about this long. We're at about 250 years. That's exceptional. And so this would be the right moment, come in and change things all around. But is that the way we want to go? Do we want to go towards communism? Do we want to go towards something that has never worked anywhere? Do we want to go towards something that just makes the powerful people more powerful, and the rest of us all kind of share the same smaller and smaller slices of the same nasty pie? Because that's what you get. All the promises of free education or free health care or there's nothing free about it. Somebody has to pay for it. And they can't tax the wealthy enough to pay for it because, well, one, the wealthy have that unique ability to pick up all their stuff and leave, and they do that. I mean, you saw that. You saw that with business. That's why it all went to China. It's like, well, I can move my whole business. I can move Budweiser, right? That's what happened. Because sane minds have to do that thing. It's like, I've got to save money. I've got to make money for the shareholders, or I got to do the thing that everyone else is doing. That's why textiles left. That's why furniture manufacturing left. That's why mask manufacturing left. It's like, well, I've got to do the thing that makes me competitive with everyone else. So, what we're seeing is under communism, it's sort of a law. So the communists, their only real goal is to spread communism. It's not to create happy people. And as we're looking at this election, you can see there's nothing about this election that's trying to create happy people. It's trying to create divisions. And I don't think that's what we want. So it's time to look at China again and look at the failure of what they've attempted and how it's hurt the whole world. And to basically say, we don't want that here. And so as we go into this election coming up very soon, that's probably the thing to keep in mind is, what do we really want here? What is it that's given us the ability to do better? Beepers from China. Anyway, as an added bonus, I'm attaching a brand new music video to the end of this, and I hope you enjoy it very much. So, thanks for listening. Have a great day, and I hope you enjoy this video. Thanks.